speak to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So I'm from Cobb, as I've told many of you many times. And some of you know that my father was a state representative in this House. And as much as he loved serving in public office, and he really did love it, it broke his heart, literally. He died at age 50 after his second heart attack. So I myself entered politics with open eyes. I didn't expect fairness or kindness, although I've been on the receiving end of both. I know that there's nothing I can say to change your vote, so I'm not going to talk very long. I've literally been told by members I respect that testifying doesn't change the vote, which is really kind of sad, because I remember back to the days of Denmark Groover, and I think he changed a few votes. We're here with this version of the bill because we never had a chance. I think we could have worked this out. There was willingness on the part of one of the Republican commissioners to work something out. And the truth is, we never had that chance. We were never given that chance, because it was pretty well known and said to us about the other map that you'll consider for Cobb, that they didn't have to talk with us, the Democratic members of my group. They didn't have to talk to us. They didn't have to work with us, because they were going to get their bill passed without talking to us or without dealing with us. Now, I don't expect fair all the time, but my God, that's just not fair, not to even give us a chance to work it out. And the arrogance to say to us, we don't have to talk to you because we're going to go over your heads and there's not a damn thing you can do about it. So I just want to say to you, I wish testimony did change votes. I wish we still had that kind of House. But I'm okay either way. But I did want to share with you that it's hard working when there's not fairness. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Chair recognizes Chairman Setzler to speak to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, I want to address this issue. I appreciate Chairman Carson teeing this up, and I want to really speak to the heart of some of the things that were said and some of the things that have been suggested. I won't speak to everything that's been said this week, because this body, I think, has been dishonored by the posture and the words and candidly the silliness of some of our members, both in legislative proceedings and in public. But I won't go there. That's not appropriate for us to speak to. I'll leave that up to every member to evaluate for themselves. What I want to speak to today is the fact that before you in House Bill 1154 are fair, balanced maps for the Cobb County Board of Commissioners. They're maps that recognize the diversity of Cobb County. They're maps that are, although these were not the sole consideration, they're politically balanced. They provide this balance that folks in Cobb County can look at and say, that makes sense to me. When I think about the rural, suburban nature of West Cobb, there's a district in West Cobb. When I think about the suburban East Cobb, there's a district for East Cobb. When I think about the high-density commercial Central Cobb area, there's a commission district that represent that communities of interest. And of course, the suburban, slightly more urbanized South Cobb County has a community interest that recognizes them. Any citizen who knows Cobb County can say, that map looks fair. The folks in that area tend to think the same way. They're going to want to have single-family residential and quality of life commercial around them, and this map recognizes that. It recognizes the Truist Park and the sort of the central Cobb commercial area that's vibrant, that's growing, and a lot of young millennials, and a lot of the vibrancy in Cobb County that's new growth that we're so very proud of. But friends, the suggestion somehow that this process has somehow been sidestepped, or that there's been that this map represents anything other than a fair, balanced, appropriate map for Cobb County is irony that I think is almost deafening. You know, as we think about the representation here in Cobb County, this idea that the minority party has this grip on Cobb County, at the beginning of this session, when this map was filed, there were 7 Republican members who lived in Cobb County of this body. There were 6 Democrat members of this body who lived in Cobb County. Now, because of the way the delegation works, there are members who live in Fulton County who represent parts of their district touch Cobb County. That creates this very, very narrow balance of 8 Democrats, 7 Republicans in the Cobb County Commission, or the Cobb County delegation process. And on the Senate side, it's 3 Republicans live in Cobb County, 1 Democrat senator lives in Cobb County. Again, but with Fulton County senators, it's a 3-3 circumstance. I share that to say Cobb is a very politically balanced place, and this map delivers for Cobb County's citizen a map that we can be very proud of, that maintains that very balanced political nature, and in addition to those commonly understood communities of interest. What happened, however, and I won't mention names because the people that were part of this are in this room, there was a scheming partisan huddle, not by the majority party, but by the minority party in December. In fact, I've got an email to that effect right here, ladies and gentlemen. And on this email, there were 4 members of the minority caucus. In fact, members who spoke here today were in this email. You know, one of the members spoke about some things happened in a dark room. Well, I can tell you in the dark room, members of the minority party were scheming to put together a map that one of our members in the minority caucus has proposed to create a total 5-0 Democrat takeover of the Cobb County Commission. It was engineered to be a 5-0 takeover of this commission. They looked at trend lines, they looked at where the politics were, they said, you know what, we're going to create a map that maybe has 1 Republican representative now, but we see, based on our modeling, this will be a complete Democrat takeover by 2026. In fact, it was very artfully done. If you understand the way this process is done and you study their work, it was pretty ingenious work, actually. I'll give them credit for it. But in that dark room that the earlier representative was talking about, members of the Democratic Party were scheming and putting together a singularly partisan map that would take a county that has 53% Democrat, 47% Republican representation, and deliver a 5-0 control to their party through this redistricting process. It's interesting to folks who are the most shrill and most ugly in their presentations and their criticism of these maps are themselves the ones in that very dark room scheming a complete partisan takeover of Cobb County. I'm proud to say that the majority party, being magnanimous, is not even drawing a map for Cobb County that would likely leave a Republican majority on the county commission. In fact, members of the majority party here that I represent and is supporting HB 1154 have been criticized by some by saying, wait a minute, why wasn't there more of an effort to try to wrest control back from a Democrat-controlled county commission? The answer is that's not what this process is about. This process is about fair representation that fairly represents communities of interest, that likely, when anyone looks at the communities of interest that's manifest in HB 1154, folks can say, that makes sense. That looks like Cobb County. And by the way, it's not seeking to change the Democrat partisan control of our county commission. Ladies and gentlemen, it's that same magnanimity, if you will, that I'm proud to be a part of, that I think Chairman Carson is wise to have supported in his filing of HB 1154. It's that exact sense that the very critics of HB 1154 had their very hands caught in the political cookie jar in this email that says it's important to get your final feedback before we socialize this with the rest of the delegation and the public. The only members on this email, I won't mention names because we don't do that in the Wellers, 4 members of the Minority Caucus scheming in that dark room in December of 2021 for this decidedly partisan map, Mr. Chairman. Friends, HB 1154 is something we can all be very proud of. We don't call names out in this place, but we do call facts. And I will tell you that when you think about the circumstance that's being addressed here, and you think about the ugliness that's been presented in committee, you think about this, the ugly claims and the half-truths that have been shared, I think members of the public deserve better. And I can tell you for sure Cobb County deserves better. You might even see histrionics and excited folks waving their arms in this very well here today, but I can tell you the facts still remain. What we have before us is a fair, balanced county commission map that everybody can be proud of, that is in fact based on fairness and representing the process that we can all be very proud of. Now, the issue was raised, Mr. Speaker, and I know we're short on time, of one commissioner who chose to move within her district 4 months after being reelected. I want you guys to imagine, ladies and gentlemen of the House, I want you to imagine somebody that when they were elected was sitting right here where Houston Gaines sits. This is, if you can imagine this being Cobb County, they were elected, they live where Houston, relative to this chamber, about where Houston's seat is. And if this is Cobb County, they moved 4 months after being elected way back there to about where Bill Yurt is back there. And I can see Bill over there by the door, my friend Bill, okay? Moving dramatically across their district. It's someone's prerogative to do that, but when someone moves from where they live when elected up there in a precinct next to one of their other sitting commissioners, are we as a delegation, are we as legislators to take the representative lines of 800,000 people in Cobb County and twist and bend and contort those lines to reach up in a big arm and drag them into a district because where they chose to move? Ladies and gentlemen of the House, when I talk to my constituents, folks are mad that politicians self-deal to themselves. We're called to be statesmen. The idea that we would draw maps around where one person and their real estate agent decided to put in a real estate offer is simply nonsense. It's beneath this body, and the fact that 1154 gives a mechanism for that commissioner to continue to serve for the remainder of their term, I think is the basis of fairness in which we're working, and that gives her a path forward to continue to represent her district should she choose. Mr. Speaker, as I conclude, I just want to say to you, I am disappointed at members of this body, the fake outrage that's been generated, the ugly things that have been said. I won't even read the words that were said in Cobb County this weekend in a community gathering. But the reckless divisiveness that I believe denigrates what has historically been a true fight for freedom and justice for all people is something that this process is, I think, candidly, should not be sullied by. And I think HB 1154 is something we can all be very proud of. And with that, Mr. Speaker, yield the well.
Gentleman has yielded the well. Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? The chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. So we're going on now to the minority report, a total of 20 minutes. The chair recognizes Representative Allen for the minority report.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm going to try to tone down the fake outrage that we've heard and try not to flail my arms. But law and order, rules, rule of law, all those are words that we hear spoken and directed at others, but used by most. And I'm going to come back to that. But today is a very sad day. A sadness that I, like many others in this chamber, are uniquely qualified and positioned to feel. See, I've been a minority my entire life. And I'm sort of used to it But the problem is, with this comes some very relative superpowers. I can spot things. I can sense things. And I can feel things. Now, some of you in this room are experiencing being a minority for maybe the first time. So I get it. It's scary. You get a little frustrated when you see rules that are designed to let you work, but never let you win. It's hard to go up against rules and structures where you have an appearance for fairness, but a reality of failure. So I get it. I've been there. I constantly occupied that space. Now, I know I'm going to get accused of playing the race card, but let me be clear. I am only playing the hand I was dealt. Plus, I'm used to that. When uncomfortable truths are spoken, that seems to be the default. In committee, a colleague of mine mentioned race, and I could see that people physically became uncomfortable. But what I want you to understand is how uncomfortable it is for someone in the minority to realize these truths in that moment and articulate it. It's not comfortable for either one of us. And this is an opportunity for us to do what's right and to not move forward with producing maps that impact so many who have shown up to vote and let their voice be heard. Now, you see, the majority came and talked about, local control and the fair process, but what we can clearly see, and the reason we're here today, is because it only takes effect when the locals need to be controlled. Once we start having electoral wins, we need to start reining that back. And as chair of the delegation, I knew that our process had to be above board. When I saw the memo from the leadership saying that all local bills will be treated as local, I had a little glimmer of hope. We talked with commissioners. We made their edits. We met with delegation members and the community just to make sure we had a chance at getting our maps passed. But when I saw comments in the press from my colleagues that ignored all of our work, when the emails went unresponded to, when meetings produced more and more no-shows, I knew we had no chance. Remember, I see things. In committee, this is where the reality really started to set in. There was one argument, and you've heard it today, that because of our delegation and two of our delegation members not living in Cobb County, their vote doesn't matter, it just doesn't count. Now, most of us in this chamber represent a county in which we don't live in. That's the nature of how these maps have been drawn. We also know that it was 7 times, and I'll include today as the 8th, 7 times over 2 hearings by 3 different presenters. It has been said that the Cobb delegation is a 7-6 majority of those who live in Cobb. This is clearly signifying that the other 2 members who represent their communities are less than, do not count as much. And then my other colleague talked earlier about when in committee the term cracking and packing was said. The presenter actually laughed because he didn't know that those were real terms, thought they were made up. When asked if he knew the Voting Rights Act and legal requirements, just shrugged his shoulders, said no, and proceeded to say this is a map that was fair because if they said the balance of power, their words, not mine. Also in committee, a commissioner that has been drawn out of her district was doxxed. A single female commissioner, they stood up and read off her address in an angry fit in order to incite some type of response. That is completely irresponsible. They also told her that if she wants to continue to serve, and they repeated it today, that she should not have bought a new home, even though that home is still in her district. As if it's that simple, I'll point out that no other commissioner is faced with this burden. I sense things. And to be clear, the balance of power that they talk about could have been achieved without this petty vindictive move. What is happening is an intentional target of a young, universally respected, progressive voice that they saw an opportunity to get out of her office 3 years early, 1 year into a 4-year term. And it's not just this one black female. In 2018, Lucy McBath won a congressional seat. She's been drawn out. In 2018, Sharice Davis, the first black female elected to the school board. In the maps you're going to hear later, drawn out. And in these commission maps, Jerica Richardson, drawn out. Now, not to mention, during committee, it was also stated that the location of the commissioners' homes were not a factor. However, last month, before anyone saw the maps, one of the members that you heard from today went to the press and said, I quote, she committed political suicide by moving, end quote. This is the same member that also told reporters that they did not have to work with Democrats in the delegation because they knew we would be here today. So the overtures about wanting to work together and the question asked of was there a reach out, I will answer that emphatically, no. So unfortunately, now I have to go back to my constituents who mobilized, energized, went out and selected their duly elected representatives and tell them that that vote really doesn't count. It doesn't matter. Because the majority has been able to strip us, the duly elected members of this delegation, of our ability to go out and do the work that you elected us to do. Once again, I feel things. So there's also been a reference to the emails. I want to speak on that for just 2 seconds. The member that spoke about emails that went out fails to neglect that the 4 members that were copied on the email that was sent to commissioners and to school board members about this process were members of the leadership. If you want to be in leadership, you should have run. The leadership of the Cobb delegation was elected unanimously. If you did not want that leadership, you could have said no. Or matter of fact, you could have showed up for a meeting. So what was our process? We went through and talked with commissioners and school board members. We then went to the delegation with proposed maps. We then went to a delegation meeting in which no one showed up from the other side, and then we had a community meeting where the maps could be discussed. We have followed the process every single step of the way, and if you feel like you've been cut out, welcome to the minority. So I want to close by just acknowledging that this has been set in motion for months. We knew we were not going to get a chance to do our jobs like our colleagues in the majority. We're not going to be able to respond to the will of our voters. But I will tell you, our votes are under attack. Our ability to do our work is being diminished. And it's maddening, it's frustrating, but unfortunately it's nothing new. The majority, I know you won't join me in voting no, but you should. If you really like rules and order, then restore it. If you don't like to be called a thief, stop stealing. And if you don't want to be accused of doing things based on race, stop that too. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I yield the balance of my time to Representative Wilkerson.
9 minutes left. Chair recognizes the Minority Caucus Whip, Representative Wilkerson, for the balance of the minority report.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Man, was I wrong, and I admit it. I believe that we were going to follow the same rules that we followed probably 40 years at least, where you win your county, you work with everybody, you get a map that you can agree on. This week, I have been wrong. I've been called a liar. I've had the state troopers called on me. Well, that was last week, but it kind of runs together when the cops are coming after you. We have weaponized the police way too many times. The rules should apply to everyone. I agree, elections do have consequences, but rules should not. The people that we represent should not. And I wasn't going to speak until I got called a liar again. Let me tell you about that email that was found, because people are asking about an email that was found. The email wasn't found. We sent it to them. The email was sent to, let me pull up my glasses so I can tell you who it went to, from Representative Eric Allen on December 20th. And you all should have it, because I think it's very important that you guys know the facts. So you can vote however you want, however you're told to, but you should have the facts. On December 20th, Eric Allen, the chairman of our delegation, sent an email to Lisa Cupid, Democrat, Kelly Gambrill, Republican, Jerica Richardson, Democrat, Joanne Burrell, Republican, Monique Sheffield, Democrat. Copied Terry Nolowitz, Mary Francis. So my colleague didn't tell you all that. It was never lost. We sent it to both parties. And what he said was, he walked through this process. The leadership got together. I've had experience drawing the maps. I was involved as well. And they came with the map. Then they sent it to the commissioners. And I remember we had our hearing, and I talked to the Republican commissioners, because I don't meddle in local politics. I remember before I even got here, they say, stay away from local stuff if you can. Stay out of that area. And I tried to. I support them, Democrat and Republican. I would love to keep things kind of the same. Cobb County is doing great. The county, the school board, we'll talk about that a little bit later. But I asked each commissioner, how do you like the map? They loved it until they started looking at numbers and doing analysis on political data. And then when we had our meeting, Commissioner Joanne Burrell came down here with the 2015 map, or some year that was not applicable anymore, but she said, I want to make it look like this. And we said, well, Commissioner Burrell, you can't. But what we will do is we will walk you down there. The chairman of our delegation walked her down there and said, whatever we can do to help you represent your community, we will do that. So let's be very clear. Only one group had at public hearings. That was the delegation. Only one group released their maps to the whole universe. That was the delegation. Only one group released it to both Democrats and Republicans. If you ask my colleagues in the back that are Democrats, they didn't see this map any time before the Republicans did if they weren't in leadership. We weren't huddling in the corner, cutting deals, because Cobb is a great place to live, and if you lived there, you wouldn't know that. But you don't. You're just coming to push a button and take over our county. You don't live there. You don't know where Hurt Road is. You might, because you might pass through to get to the mall or to a Braves game, or maybe you come up to the stadium to see. But, every morning we ask each other, how you doing? Well, I'm going to be honest with you. This shit sucks, and I apologize for that. But I go to my wife, and she doesn't want to hear about this. And I apologize. She doesn't want to hear about this. I broke the quorum just like the person that's been calling you a liar. But at the end of the day, it is frustrating. It is frustrating, and I do apologize for that. But at the end of the day, it's hard to go home and tell people that you serve with some great people when they do this to your county, when they do this to people you represent. So with that, push the button. It should be about 96. Yes, 95, yes. 60-something, no. And then we'll go back home and explain why we thought this was the right thing to do, even though they had no hearings, no public input. It was strictly drawn by partisan reasons. And I'm going to ask for a ruling shortly, if I'm allowed. And I'll turn it back over. But thank you for the time, and thank you all for listening, but it's frustrating. Thank you, and I yield the well.
We're going on now to the chairman's time. Total of 20 minutes for the chair's time. Chair recognizes Chairman Darlene Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to report that this bill had a thorough vetting in our subcommittee, and it was again heard and then passed in the full committee. I will tell you our committee follows decorum, and each member was allowed to vote as they wished to. This map met the criteria required by the Legislative and Congressional Redistricting Office, and I will yield the remainder of my time to Chairman Carson.
Chair recognizes Chairman Carson for the balance of the chairman's time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you to Chair Lady Taylor for all you've been through for this. You've been a role model to follow. I just want to reiterate a few points. These are fair maps. Number one, these are areas, they're drawn with communities of interest in mind, and they reflect the political composition of Cobb County. And just on a personal note, I apologize that this whole process has had to take slander, language, and so forth. Cobb County is better than this, and frankly, to my fellow colleagues, we have not shown you that. But Cobb County as a whole, I assure you, is better than this, and this House deserves better. I do ask for your favorable consideration for this map, and I yield the will.
Gentleman has yielded the well. Previous question has been ordered. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this bill now pass? All those in favor of the passage of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. What purpose does Representative Anulowicz rise?
Parliamentary
State your
inquiry.
inquiry.
Yes, sir, and apologies if I sound shrill. If this ingenious scheming took place, wouldn't the resulting map that the Democrats drew have changed more than 9 precincts?
I truly don't know the answer to that question. Chair recognizes, what purpose does Representative Walensky rise?
Parliamentary inquiry.
State your inquiry.
Is it not true that one of the members who spoke in the well when they were talking about inappropriateness or ridiculousness may have been talking about when he jumped into a press conference he wasn't invited to and got on the microphone?
I couldn't hear your inquiry. What purpose does Representative McLeod rise?
Parliamentary inquiry.
State your inquiry.
Is it true that the chairman still doesn't know what is in Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act and what packing and cracking is?
I don't know what any member of this body knows or does not know. Chair recognizes Chairman Setzler, or what purpose do you rise?
Parliamentary inquiry.
State your inquiry.
Isn't it true that all the concerns with respect to the Voting Rights Act were very well managed in this, and in fact, the only minority influence district went from 46.3% African American to 46.7%, and that is a model of how we should proceed with drawing fair maps.
The gentleman so states. Final parliamentary inquiry. What purpose does Representative Wilkerson rise?
Parliamentary inquiry, Mr. Speaker.
State your inquiry.
I was wondering if the speaker could make a ruling on 18.1 where the line says that the committee shall observe such rules in considering legislation when the delegation has submitted rules that require a hearing.
That applies only to the Intergovernmental Coordination Committee, not to Governmental Affairs. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machines on the passage of House Bill 1154. The ayes are 95, the nays are 64. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. What purpose does Chairman Carson rise?
To make a motion.
State your motion.
I move that House Bill 1154 be immediately transmitted to the Georgia Senate.
The gentleman has moved that House Bill 1154 be immediately transmitted to the Senate. Is there objection? There is objection. Does the gentleman move? Gentleman moves. All those in favor of immediate transmittal will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machine on the gentleman's motion. The ayes are 95, the nays are 61. This bill is on its way to the State Senate. Clerk will read the caption to House Bill 1028.
House Bill 1028 by Representative Earhart of the 36 and others to be entitled an act to amend an act providing for the election of members of the Board of Education of Cobb County. This bill having been referred to the Committee on Governmental Affairs, that committee recommends that this bill do pass.
Chair recognizes Representative Earhart to present the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, I bring before you for your consideration House Bill 1028, which sets forth the new district lines for the Cobb County Board of Education. The map achieves the goals of those who drew and support it, which is, number 1, local control. Number 2, legal compliance. 3, equal representation. And 4, the stability of the school district as a whole and the 7 individual posts that make it up. The local Cobb Board of Education voted to accept this map after requesting that a plan be drawn that first and foremost complies with the Georgia Constitution, the U.S. Constitution, and the Voting Rights Act. A few facts about the map. The population deviation for each of the 7 posts is very minimal, less than 0.5%. The plan potentially creates 3 minority opportunity voting districts, posts 2, 3, and 6. Each post is represented by, or at least contains, 2 high schools. That was a request and a requirement, a preference of the school board. The board considered communities of interest. I'd like to describe those as it relates to a school district. For example, the cities within Cobb County falling entirely within an individual school board post was a plus. The city of Acworth is completely within the city of Post 1. Powder Springs, where I live, all within the city of Post 3. The city of Austell, mostly in Post 3. Vinings, the future city of Vinings, 100% inside Post 6. The future city of East Cobb, completely inside Post 5. The future city of Mapleton, largely in Post 2. The future city of Lost Mountain, also largely in Post 7. It's worth noting that within the map, other things that were considered. Number 1, high school attendance zones. That is important. Those are largely represented by the same member. School feeder patterns were also considered and reflected appropriately on this map. The current map kept every member who is eligible for re-election inside their same post. That's a difficult job given where some of the members do live close to each other and the natural population shifts that have occurred over the past 10 years. Ladies and gentlemen, as a 45-year resident of Cobb County and the proud product myself of the Cobb County public school system, I graduated from Osborne High School. I won't tell you the year. It is my honor to carry this bill and to ask for your favorable consideration of this map, which is both equitable, legally sound. Mr. Speaker, I am happy to yield for questions.
You do not have any questions.
Okay, thank you very much. I yield the well.
Lady has yielded the well. We have others that wish to speak on the bill. Chair recognizes Representative Roberts to speak to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good afternoon, colleagues. I don't live in Cobb County, and my district doesn't actually include Cobb County, so I don't really have a dog in the fight as to the actual maps that are approved today. But I do want to talk about the process or deviation therefrom that has been happening in this chamber because it affects every single person in this room as well as every single citizen we represent. In America, there are certain principles upon which our democratic republic was founded, a government of the people, by the people, and for the people, where the majority rules, and a respect for the rule of law. I heard the majority leader reference the rule of law earlier, so I hope we can all agree how important it is. These principles have given me comfort throughout my life because it gives us a predictable framework for functioning in a civilized society. From those basic tenets, we write laws, rules, and bylaws to provide further guidance. If we abandon these principles, it produces chaos. Imagine if, when we drive, we know that there are rules about who has to yield at an intersection. And if we abandon those, it would, again, produce chaos. It undermines our basic contract with each other to respect the rule of law. This body, and specifically the majority party, has a long history of preserving home rule and local control. Legislation impacting local governments or local bills are by our own state house rules supposed to be left to legislators elected by the people who live in the affected locality. It's both to avoid having partisan fights over the basic governmental services these local governments provide, and to ensure that the citizens in those localities have the ability to hold those leaders accountable at the ballot box when they don't deliver those services. Specifically with regard to local redistricting, I'm told in the history of the House, these local maps have always traveled through the process as local bills, not general bills. We have always been, it's really distracting when people talk loud. We've always been a rubber stamp, essentially, for the maps that are drawn by the local commission or school board with input from the public. In fact, the last redistricting year in 2011, all of the more than 230 bills were brought as local bills. So I have to ask myself, why would the majority party of this House abandon its own rules, its local delegation bylaws, and a long-standing precedent of local courtesy and deference? During the Governmental Affairs Committee hearings, we asked Republican sponsors of these bills several questions. Was the map the subject of any public hearings? No. Did you consult with other members of your delegation? No. Didn't your local delegations pass rules that say how local legislation should be treated? Yes, but we can do this when there isn't a consensus. Do your bylaws say you need a unanimous vote? No, a majority. So shouldn't you just have accepted the vote of the majority? Why did you feel the need to go around your delegation, draw your own maps, and ignore the will of a majority of the citizens of your county? Because the county has changed. When asked how it had changed, no tangible response was given. All right, let's look objectively at what changed. I feel like we need to break it down to Sesame Street level. One of these things does not look like the other. We are doing this in Gwinnett and Cobb counties so far. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to see in these counties that demographics have shifted recently, and the majority of citizens in these counties have duly elected more Democrats, and specifically Black and brown Democrats, to local commissions and school boards. Cobb specifically recently elected Democratic leadership to the county commission for the first time in a generation, an all-female commission, and Black leadership for the first time in its history. That shift is also reflected in the representation of the local delegations in this House, who now have the majority in those delegations. Now, before you dismiss me as, was it silly, and get defensive at my even hinting that race has anything to do with your deviation from longstanding rules and precedent, I'm inviting those of you who look like me, because we don't get up here and talk about race a whole lot, to just listen for a minute, because it might help you understand why our friends of color in this chamber feel like they do. The state's history around local rule tells us a lot. Local control historically has been a dominant theme in Southern political identity and very much is associated with the perpetration of racial slavery, racial segregation, and racial discrimination. For example, the Georgia legislature demonstrated an acute awareness of such local independence after Brown versus Board of Education in 1954, when you know what it did? It enacted legislation to defund any local school system that desegregated, to provide vouchers to parents who sent their children to private schools that arose in a desegregated school system, and to allow public school teachers to maintain participation in the state teacher retirement system if they moved to private schools in desegregated districts. Boy, that sounds similar to legislation pending in front of this legislature right now, some almost 70 years later. In response to Brown, our very own Georgia Senator Walter F. George presented the Southern Manifesto, which I'll paraphrase. It essentially said, "Why are you outside agitators, federal courts, Northerners, coming into Georgia threatening revolutionary changes in our public school system and destroying amicable relations between the white and Negro races that have been created through 90 years of patient effort by the good people of both races?" This reaction combines the false narrative of amicable relations between the races with an appeal to local control threatened by outsiders. This is the classic plea for local control that was not backed by a legitimate local consensus given the exclusion of minority voices. I could go on, there's lots of examples. These are just a few where history shows local control was used to oppress minority voices here in Georgia. And today we hear similar false narratives under this gold dome about why we shouldn't teach divisive history. Because good people on both sides don't need to relive history that makes them uncomfortable. Well, I think people that look like me need to try and walk a mile in the shoes of our colleagues of color in this chamber and try to imagine how uncomfortable racial oppression has been for them simply because their skin is a different color. Our kids deserve an honest history that includes America's triumphs as well as its failures. That's how we ensure those uncomfortable events aren't repeated. So when my colleagues and I say this sudden abandonment of local control and precedent sounds in racial oppression, we don't say it to be punitive or dramatic. Georgia has a long history of it. And a member in this House wasn't shy at all when he said, "We're all for local control until the locals get out of control." How are the locals out of control? Are you really saying that electing Democrats, and specifically Democrats of color, is defined as being out of control? This sudden deviation from process sends a message to more than 750,000 citizens in Cobb County and more than 1 million in Gwinnett that if you live in a county where the majority of its citizens duly elect Democrats to lead it, the minority in that county should have the choice to reject their elections. That's dangerous, y'all. And what's even worse, those of you who are using majority control in this House to subvert local control, you can't even be held accountable at the ballot box. You are subverting the voices of citizens who do not have the opportunity to vote you out. That is anti-democratic and sounding more in authoritarianism. We just can't change the rules if we don't like the results. I know y'all love a good football analogy, and my friend Rep McClain likened this to moving the goalpost in the middle of the game. I have to believe that some of you agree with me, that you're sitting there thinking, boy, I don't want her to come down to South Georgia and tell my folks what to do. Today, we passed 31 local redistricting bills on the local calendar. We have passed hundreds thus far during this session. Why are those legislators given the privilege of our long-standing process and rules? Why does majority rule in our delegations only apply to Republican majority counties? By forcing these school board maps on Cobb County, you are saying that only the majority party in this chamber are allowed to be full members of this legislature. Our children are watching us, and no matter how many books we ban, they will see this anti-democratic change of the rules exactly for what it is. Y'all, it's time that we agree that the rule of law and our social contract with each other, that the majority rules must take precedent over politics and party. Otherwise, I fear we will never be able to agree on anything else. I yield the well, Mr. Speaker.
Okay, that is all of the speakers on the bill. And my understanding, the minority report has been waived. So is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? The chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this bill now pass? All those in favor of the passage of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machine on the passage of House Bill 1028. The ayes are 94, the nays are 59. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. What purpose does Representative Earhart rise?
To make a motion.
State your motion.
I move that HB 1028 be electronically transmitted to the Senate immediately.
Immediately transmitted, okay. The representative has moved that House Bill 1028, I'm sorry, be immediately transmitted to the Senate. Is there objection? There is objection. Does the lady move? The lady moves. All those in favor of immediate transmittal will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machine on the lady's motion. The ayes are 94, the nays are 59, and the bill is on its way to the state Senate immediately. House Bill 961 will be postponed until the next legislative day. The chair recognizes Representative Tyler Paul Smith for a motion.
Mr. Speaker, I move this House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 907.
Clerk will read the caption.
Amend Code Section 21-2540, the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to conduct of special primaries and special elections generally.
The chair recognizes Representative Tyler Paul Smith to explain the Senate substitute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members of this body, I bring to you House Bill 907. The only change is how the paragraph is written. It's the same as what this body had passed out earlier this month. And, Mr. Speaker, if there are no questions, I will yield the well.
You do not appear to have any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
On the gentleman's motion that the House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 907, all those in favor will vote aye, those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machine. On the gentleman's motion, the ayes are 122, the nays are 31, and this House has agreed to the Senate substitute to House Bill 907. What purpose does Representative Smith rise?
To make a motion.
State your motion.
Mr. Speaker, I move this House immediately transmit House Bill 907 to the governor.
I'm going to rule your motion out of order. All right. Chair recognizes Chairman Setzler for a motion.
Mr. Speaker, I move that this House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 841.
Chairman Setzler has moved that the House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 841. The clerk will read the caption.
House Bill 841 by Representative Dollar, the 45th, Cooper, the 43rd, Setzler, the 35th, to be entitled an act to incorporate the city of East Cobb.
Chair recognizes Chairman Setzler to explain the Senate substitute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, 841 is the city of East Cobb. There was some debate and some discussion here on the floor when this passed the first time about the requirement for the specific council members to live in the geography of their districts. The bill was drawn broadly to do that, but there was language put in Senate committee to more clearly specify that each council member must live physically within their district. That was clarified in Senate committee, and Mr. Speaker, that was the only change. And with that, I'd be glad to yield to questions if there are any.
Do not appear to have any questions.
Urge your favorable consideration of HB 841.
On the gentleman's motion that the House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 841, all those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machines. On the gentleman's motion, the ayes are 96, the nays are 62, and this House has agreed to the Senate substitute to House Bill 841. Clerk will read the caption to a group of privileged resolutions.
Honoring the life and memory of William C. Chris Giles. Honoring the Middle Georgia State University School of Aviation, recognizing February 15, 2022 as Aerospace Day at the state capitol. Congratulating and commending Georgia State University College of Law on its 40th anniversary. Recognizing and commending Takeda Pharmaceuticals America Incorporated. Recognizing and commending Dr. Molly Howard, and for other purposes. That completes the reading of the privilege resolution.
Is there any objection to adopting the privilege resolutions? The chair hears none, and the resolutions are adopted. Mr. Clerk, you want to hold the tray up? The clerk has a tray full of both Senate and House local bills submitted by members of each party. I will entertain the procedure we have followed, which is to ask for unanimous consent that the rules of the House be temporarily suspended to allow these bills to be read for the first time and assigned to committee. They will all be assigned to the Intergovernmental Coordination Committee. Is there objection? Chair hears none, and it is so ordered. Going on now to announcements. Going on to announcements. If you have signed up for an announcement, take up position up front. Chair recognizes Chairman Corbett for an announcement.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Motor Vehicles Committee will meet in the morning, 8 o'clock, 6:06. Thank you.
Chair recognizes Chairman Dickey for an announcement.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Agriculture and Consumer Affairs will meet in the morning, 8 o'clock, 406 CLOB. Thank you.
Chair recognizes Representative Gullett for an announcement.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Governmental Affairs will be meeting today at room 506 CLOB. 506 CLOB, a meeting upon adjournment. Thank you.
Chair recognizes Representative Gamble for an announcement.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, tomorrow morning at 7 o'clock in 133 Capitol, the fellowship will meet.
Chair recognizes Chairman Darlene Taylor for an announcement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Speaker. The Life and Health Subcommittee will meet in the morning at 8 o'clock in 341. Thank you.
That completes our announcements. The chair recognizes the Majority Leader of the House for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move that this House stand adjourned until 10:30 Tuesday, February the 15th, 2022.
The Majority Leader has moved that this House be adjourned until Tuesday, February 15th at 10:30 a.m. All those in favor of the motion will say aye. Those opposed will say no. The ayes have it, and this House will be adjourned until Tuesday at 10:30 a.m.